Good morning. You're listening to Central Wisconsin's 24-hour information station, AM 1320 WFHR. It's time now for the Morning Magazine, brought to you by Comfort Air Heating, Cooling, Plumbing.
That's where you have Morning Magazine. Your host, James, here. We are joined by not only Wisconsin Rapids Community Media, we have Joe over there, but right now we have Wisconsin Rapids Mayor Zach Vruwink with us. Good morning, Mayor.
Good morning, James.
Thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate the time, and I know how busy you are, and especially in the last 24 or 48 hours, I imagine it's been incredibly busy.
A few more things on our plate today and yesterday.
Yeah. So I want to touch on certainly the results real quick. We want to cover that, certainly. I imagine that you feel pretty happy about the results. Pretty good about them. Mm-hmm. What is it like for those of us that have never been in that kind of situation, waiting for those poll numbers?
Well, I think the day of is always sort of a mixed bag of emotions because you work really hard leading up to that day, and you hope we don't get a major snowstorm. You hope that the weather is not. It was cold yesterday. Right. There's a whole number of factors that go into turnout, right? And so I think that moment for me is it's the moment you work for, certainly. So there's a moment of accomplishment and achievement just getting to that day, and then shortly after the polls close, fortunately we don't have any issues like some other areas have had over some time with our elections.
Good thing we didn't use an app.
Yeah, right. Old school works, right? Paper ballots work. So it's nice. It feels great to have the confidence of the voters to come out on top in the primary, and I'm going to continue working hard over the next over a month to continue to reach voters and talk about the issues that are facing our community.
And if we have time, I'd like to touch on a little bit of that subject a little bit later.
Sure.
But one thing I wanted to mention too, and especially for you. You've been doing this for a while now, so you're going for your fifth term here, and as you've gone on with this, is it also feel good sometimes to see the total number of votes? Just seeing how many people are voting, just in general. I mean, I understand that you have a much more personal investment in this than I do, but I look at these numbers and I'm encouraged by this. I'm encouraged by seeing the amount of people voting, and regardless of who they are voting for, just that they are voting. It's great to see this.
Yeah, and I think yesterday, there wasn't a lot on the spring ballot, the primary ballot, right? But the turnout was decent. It's not a significant portion of our eligible voters, but it's in the grand scheme of things, having about 20% of the voters turnout and the eligible voters in the city turnout is significant.
In this day and age when we have more people voting on American Idol than we do in our elections, I want to tip my hat to our community anytime in any community that is voting, because it seems a little ridiculous, but that is what it is. That's where it's at.
Yeah, that's a reality.
So congratulations on that, of course, and congratulations to Shane Blazer as well.
Right.
When it comes to this balancing, you're watching TV, you're trying to keep up to date on all these notes, and you also had a city council meeting last night.
Right.
So how was that? How was the meeting? We'll get into, and how was it kind of trying to just. Are you able to just focus on the task at hand?
Sure. I mean, the one thing that bothered me is I didn't make time to vote yesterday, so I was a little nervous heading to 6 o'clock council meeting that we were going to get done by 8 o'clock, and I was able to get to the polls 10 minutes to 8. But yeah, certainly, I mean, that's the reality associated with running every 2 years for the position of mayor is, I have to run the city at the same time, and I have to make time and make priorities for the things that are coming before us. And city council last night was no exception. There were a number of issues that I was a part of that the council was faced with on votes last night, and so you've got to continue to carve out time for both. It requires a balancing act of time management and really focusing on what's really important in the task at hand.
What were some of the highlights with the city council meeting last night?
One of the things that has been before the council for a couple of months now has been the Rafters lease. So last night's city council meeting formally adopted the lease with the Wisconsin Rapids Rafters, another 10 years. It's hard to believe they've already been here for 10 years, right? We'll give them a hand. So the city is fortunately come to negotiation terms with the Rafters and the new ownership of the team. Kind of a unique dynamic in that the current owners, or now the previous owners, were about to sell the team contingent upon a new lease. So the city was in a position of somewhat leverage in saying, well, we need to get some things done with them, but we didn't want to hold up their sale either. So I think the partnership that the city has had with the Rafters has been great. A couple of highlights in that lease. The city's going to be receiving more in lease payments than over the last 10 years, so a bit higher in rent paid to the city, which is great. And then in exchange for that rent, the city and the Rafters are going to be making continued improvements in the facility. Most notable, an outfield fence. Actually met somebody recently who indicated that they painted that fence back when the Twins were here. So that fence has been around for a while.
Yeah.
Windstorm last year caused a little bit of damage to it, but some things like that. So the we're going to put a padding on there, which will be beneficial to both the Rafters and the high school and Legion teams that use Witter Field. So that was a project or initiative that the city was council unanimously agreed to pursue the lease with the Rafters. There was some negotiation back and forth through the process, but it turned out well.
There will be no Albuquerque Rafters.
Yeah, right.
We're keeping them right here.
No,
That's good to know.
Yeah, and that was a concern we had too, is when we heard that they wanted to renew the lease, but there was also this potential sale that we need to protect ourselves to keep that team here. The Convention Visitors Bureau, I asked them to do a little bit of an analysis of what that economic impact is to the community, and annually it's no less than $700,000 in spend and various facets in our community, whether it's the small amount of overnight stays in our hotels, whether it's the food and bev spend that happens outside the Rafters Stadium. We don't take into account the ticket sales, so once we take into account ticket sales, there's even a further impact. I mean, they employ dozens of people, obviously seasonal, but some permanent full-time year-round, and so it's quite an operation, and it's a small business in and of itself, so we're proud to keep it in the community.
And it's an interesting breakdown that you give there, and I really once again I always appreciate the transparency and kind of letting us look behind the curtain a little bit at some of this stuff. It keeps us all informed and on the same page with you, but it's also just very interesting, and especially this gray area that everybody was in right now with the Rafters as their organization, what they were doing at the ownership and trading, changing, and then kind of take care of this at the same time. It's just kind of an interesting balance there to hear all of that. When it comes to things like this, like the Rafters, or the water park that's getting built, I can't help but think of, I just took a tour of the Y.
Sure. And
I've looked at all the videos of it. I've seen, what's going on. I've talked with Raquel and other people over there about it. So I'm pretty up to date on everything. It just doesn't prepare you when you actually see it, and you cannot help but just be like, this is in our town.
Yeah,
this is a facility that you would see in Madison or some other big time city or something like that. And here we have this being built here, and it's so close, you can taste it. It is so exciting, it's exciting a lot among other things that we're talking about here.
Right.
One of the things that I felt when I was looking at the facility and touring it, and I noticed that with the guests that we had and from talking to the listeners, do you hope that this kind of ups everybody's game? That everybody, as far as like when any business out there making a new building or looking to rent a building and refurbish it or something like that, not just doing the okay work, but really like going all in and really do, because there is nothing about that Y that is average or they phoned it in or this is enough to get by. It's like the cream of the crop. It's the Cadillac of work over there that they're doing.
Yeah.
This kind of makes me feel like everybody's, it hopefully encourages everybody to up their game. Is that something that you are also hoping with this?
Yeah, no question. There's a couple of thoughts. First of which, I've felt that in my time in office has really been faced with a period of transition economically, but also a transition around community confidence. That unless we have an emerging and a growing community confidence and self-confidence in this community, we're not going to be able to attract the business investments, the private investments, and the others that you recognize. The YMCA and Boys and Girls Club project, I think, will be catalytic, certainly, from a redevelopment. It gives a new confidence, a renewed look at the nearby real estate and the property in which that property exists. And I think, further, the challenge for them will be to continue to reach new members and people that aren't connected with the Y or aren't connected with the Boys and Girls Club or aren't connected with the programming that they're going to provide. So I think that's the real challenge and opportunity, is some people are skeptical and saying, so what? It doesn't serve me. It doesn't benefit me. But I'll tell you, if kids don't have a safe space to go to, they're on our streets causing trouble.
Right.
And, for me as a community, as a city leader, I want to make sure that our youth and our families and our seniors all have great access to programming. And so I think from a campus standpoint, the proximity, whether it's the addition of new housing and the unfamiliarity, I know it looks different, it's going to feel different, but that's progress, right?
Yeah.
That's when we give people a safe and a clean roof over their head, give them a safe place to go after or before school, give them safe places to be active and well. I think that, that's going to be held up as a model. I mean, it's one of only 2 or 3 in the state where Boys and Girls Club YMCA have come together. And I think now that we've added or continue to exist with the VA clinic, with a renewed facility and a larger facility on the backside, and certainly the existence of the Centralia Center and the senior programming and the lunches and the meals that get served out of there, I think it's really going to be it's going to be written about for decades to come, because there isn't something like that in a community our size, much less a community of any size for that matter.
Yeah, and you hit on a couple of things there, Mayor, that are really well worded and really well said and good points, especially I think when we think about something like the Y, and hopefully everybody in the community can use it, and there is literally something there for everybody to use. They have really broken this down so well, working with the VVA and again the Y and the Boys and Girls Club working together so well. Yeah. But even if you're not a citizen who uses it, you hit on the great point there that you're going to be benefited by this, because not only is it giving kids something to do, and as one of those kids who was in your streets and causing trouble, and I'm not proud of that, but I'm being honest, I own it. Sure. I know what it's like to be that age and not having things and not having, things to kind of keep you busy and stuff. And we need this. And that's an investment in the greatest asset we have in this world. And that is our future. That is our kids. That's the future mayors of this area, the future city council members, the future Joes running the cameras for us and everything. We give them this kind of balance of that. And one of the cool things about the Y and the Boys and Girls Club and what they're doing over there too is that they plan this out and worked it so well, and at the same time there is some gray area where as things adapt and we could really use this or we could add this to it. They've made room for that. They've taken that into consideration. Yeah. It is something that I've seen in a lot of organizations, a lot of places do too. It's something else that kind of I admire about it, and I just didn't mean to take away from the city council highlights, but I couldn't help but as long as we were on the topic, kind of getting into that, because it really does feel like one of those things where, boy, if I'm a business and I'm building a new building or I'm refurbishing a building, I want it to look pretty darn good. I want to be able to keeping up with the Joneses in a sense, if you will, and everything. And it's not
definitely a tide that rises all boats, I think, and that's the thing with the project. One thing important to note, because a lot of folks, they see the new buildings and the new investment, they wonder whose money is that. And I think it's important to remind our listeners that the city's formal investment in that project was through applying for a state environmental remediation grant. So basically, the city was the applicant on behalf of the Y for some environmental remediation dollars. I think it was $150,000. And those dollars now are going to offset the contributions that community members made to make that happen. So the city does not have any formal public dollars of local money or any local taxpayer dollars in that facility directly. We agreed to rezone the property and said, commercial is not coming back, and we need to allow them to redevelop this property. The future of retail and commercial is not bright, and so therefore we need to right size the amount of commercial real estate and space in our community. So by and large, the city supported it along the way. I personally made calls to the former mall owners and, tried to get them to do something positive, and it just came to the result that they weren't going to do anything for this community that was to benefit our town. And so at that point, we needed to take ownership, the community take ownership of that property again, and certainly through the YMCA, the Legacy Foundation, others that have really opened their wallets to make this happen is pretty exciting. But I want to draw that distinction, because a lot of people think, how much, the city's paying for it? No, actually, the very, very small amount of public money, and none of it being local public money.
Anytime we can get that out there, I think it's important, because unfortunately these kind of facts and details don't get out there into the masses often enough. But it's also just a really interesting kind of to hear about the breakdown of that, and can I hear the legwork that it takes to make something like that happen. And I admire it because it is looking back before we know that this is going to happen, and we have what we have coming for us here with the Boys and Girls Club and the Y. Before all that happens, and you're just dealing with the old mall and the Yonkers and all that over there, easy go-to, a quick Band-Aid is to try to get a business in there or commercial in there, as you said, and realizing, having the ability to realize, and I want to give you and your cabinet credit here, not just trying to put it all on you here, but to be able to realize, look, that is not going to happen. And instead of dragging our feet or hoping, just crossing our fingers and hoping that somebody does, let's take action. Instead of playing defense, let's play some offense.
Right.
And let's do something that is going to, that even though it is not a commercial thing, it could commercially help the community. And you could make a lot of arguments about that as far as people from out of town coming by to use it. That the water facility there is going to be used by other schools, outside of our community.
Yeah, it's going to be an attraction from a visitor standpoint.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no way that it can't be. There's so many little parts of that there that, like when we talk about with the River Kings or the Rafters bringing in outside outside dollars that are going to do that.
Right.
So you can make the argument that by doing all of this, you did end up doing something more financial, more commercial than trying to do something commercial.
Right. You're right on. Yeah, and I think that's the trend when you start looking at these community lifestyle centers. I think is what the trend or the current modern name of what these mall redevelopments are turning into. So yeah, certainly it's been exciting to see the progress. It seems like it's slow, but when you walk through that facility and you can see the depth and breadth of what that reconstruction was all about. I mean, we're going to be able to teach kids how to cook and prepare meals. And obviously there's a lot of other spaces, whether it's a recording studio for folks to learn how to use their musical talents or other talents. It's really an incredible thing. I joke that I wish I could turn back the clock a little bit and the community had these facilities when I was a kid, right? And you said the same thing about idle hands, right? And I think it's just going to be exciting to see. But the challenge remains to get those folks to get to that facility. It's great to have the nice facility, but if you don't, for some reason, feel welcome or feel like it's for you, and I know they're intentionally working on that piece. They've got a membership for all program, very affordable, so folks that may not have the means right away, but are maybe out of the workforce, but trying to get back in, that just can't afford, but need to get on their feet. There's a lot of great programs to get people into the doors there. Speaking again with
Wisconsin Rapids Mayor Zach Vruwink, and I want to remind you that the phone lines are open for your questions for the mayor, 424-2600, 424-2600. Go ahead and call up. We have a couple minutes before our break, so I wanted to give you a chance to touch on any more notes from the city council meeting if you had them.
Yeah, we've got a number of things. The city review actually approved at the planning commission level a conditional use permit to support a small business that's opening in the former Rapids Floor Mart over on Dove Avenue over there, and those folks came through the council and unanimously approved that, which was nice to see a new small business take on a vacant building and do something with that.
Absolutely.
The other pieces to the city council meeting last night, in addition to the Rafters, we talked about that. There were a number of other pieces. We approved our contract with the fireworks vendor for the summer. So,
excellent.
We think we assume the 4th of July comes and goes, and there isn't a lot of behind the scenes. Well, the city council had to approve the contract last night, and then we also approved the preliminary resolution for curb and gutter work on 2nd Avenue. So just north of the expressway, that 2nd Avenue corridor will be reconstructed at some point. So additional street work happening over there, and then the city has been working on a number of renovations to the Centralia Center. So we'll be now purchasing and replacing a number of pieces of furniture there, as well as some of the carpeting, and thanks to support from the Senior Association. So that building, it's hard to believe, is 15 years old. And some of that gets used every day, and it's starting to look kind of tired. So I know we're painting it. It looks great already, but there's obviously you need to replace the fixtures when that time comes too.
Yeah, every once in a while, even the Simpsons had to replace their couch. Some of the things get wear and tear out of them and everything. Again, we're speaking with Mayor Zach Vruwink here for Wisconsin Rapids Mayor Zach Vruwink, and I want to thank Wisconsin Rapids Community Media also for bringing in with us. Phone lines are wide open: 424-2600, 715-424-2600. We're going to take a short break, and we'll be back with more with the mayor on Morning Magazine, AM 1320 WFHR. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to part 2 of Morning Magazine for this February 19th, 2020. You are joined by Mayor Zach Vruwink along with Wisconsin Rapids Community Media. Good morning to you, Joe. Mayor, I know we had some more notes from the council meeting that we were going to touch on, if we want to go right in there.
So the city has a community development department, and that department serves a number of functions. It performs all the building inspections, both for renovations or new construction in the city, as well as code enforcement activities. So the ordinance control officer will work in neighborhoods to deal with property maintenance issues and other code violations. In that department, the community development director vacated the position, took a position with a friend of mine and a counterpart, took him away over in the city of Manitowoc. Adam is the former director. And last night, after the conclusion of extensive search and screen process that started last October. I advanced a recommendation to the council to hire a gentleman by the name of Kyle Kearns, and I hope to bring him on a future radio show. Kyle currently is working for the city of Stevens Point in economic development and zoning administration and some of those pieces. So we're really excited to have Kyle's energy and enthusiasm come to the city of Rapids. As he remarked in his interview, it's been interesting for him to watch from an outsider's perspective all the progress and the development that's happened in the city of Rapids. Yeah. But now to have the opportunity to work from the inside is something that really drew him to the position. So really excited to have him. He worked for the city of Stevens Point for over 8 years, intern with the city of Marshfield before that, is a fellow UWSP grad, a fellow Pointer, but somebody that really cares and is passionate about the resurgence of communities like our size. And so I think it's really exciting to bring Kyle aboard. So the council approved him unanimously last night, and he will start in March.
Along with all the reasons you mentioned, are there any other reasons why you felt Kyle was a good candidate for this?
I think his philosophy as it relates to how stubborn community development projects can be. A lot of twists and turns, a lot of starts and stops. Yeah. We talked about a big one with the YMCA Boys and Girls Club just previously, but there are projects just take time, and I think he has the patience and has the understanding. Like the rest of us, we want stuff to happen quick, right? It's just things between design and architectural development and all these other components, financing to the process. Deals just take a long time, and so I think that was a strength that's stuck out. He also has some experience in working with the housing community, the landlord associations, and we have a strong landlord association here in the city, and to the extent that we can continue to keep them at the table as engaged as partners, we may not always agree, but to understand the city's objectives and what others are trying to achieve, and then trying to find common ground. I think Kyle has that experience and exposure, and coming from an environment that, was actually interestingly complementary. We think, we talked about in the off, we compare ourselves to Stevens Point, or we compare ourselves to Plover, or the next city people want to compare ourselves to. But to hear some of those folks compare us to them is really interesting. Yeah. And I think Kyle in a future show will have to have him on board to talk about some of that. But there's some technical things that the city has taken on behind the scenes that are real foundational in nature, right? Like zoning, redoing the city's zoning code. So if somebody wants to develop a property, it's really clear about what they can and can't do, and it's understood. Not a lot of gray area. Zoning can have some gray area components, but I think Kyle's strength there will be well received by the city, and we hope to introduce him to business and community members, leaders, as we go forward after Kyle starts in March.
I'm looking forward to having him on air and talking with him, meeting the guy. It sounds like a great addition to our area, and it is really interesting, and it's a perspective that we don't think of often enough, maybe, of how other towns look at us as opposed to us looking at other towns, and how that kind of goes.
Yeah, and from an economic development standpoint, Point's had a lot of success. Their economy is more diverse than ours. They've got a different mix of folks that have different educational backgrounds. So I think it'll be a challenge for him, a new challenge for him to work here. And I think from my standpoint, I've firmly believed that the part of the mayor's role is economic development, that we can't outsource that. You can't hire just an economic developer. The mayor has to be involved. And that's what I continue to get reaffirmed when I talk with developers or business leaders. They want to work with the mayor. They want to work with a community leader, not just a staff member. So it'll be nice to have in tandem somebody aboard again that's focused on economic and community development alongside myself and the mayor, because frankly, we can't afford to just add to the budget and hire somebody from the outside to do that. So it'll be nice to have Kyle take on that challenge and responsibility.
And you are kind of still bringing in an outsider perspective, or not an outsider, but an outside perspective, if you will, with that. And that's something that goes back. I mean, it's just something that is incredibly smart, certainly in politics, but it's something that you saw George Hallis and Vince Lombardi doing. I mean, they used to joke about this all the time. If you look at interviews with the two of them, where the rivalry was so intense between the Packers and the Bears, and yet they were best friends, basically. Like they would see another do a play, and later on that week, week when they were talking, be like, how did you do that? Or what did you do here and stuff, and share plays together. So you would never see that in today's NFL. But I mean, it's just kind of interesting. You don't know what you can learn if you just happen to have an open mind and take in a different perspective than your own sometimes, or just even not hiring from in-house, that sort of thing. Sometimes you need a little bit of that, a new voice.
Totally. And I think, when I talked to my counterpart in Mayor Wiesa and Point after the interview and the offer was extended, I mean, that creates some tension sometimes between community relations. And I think from our standpoint, and Mayor Wiesa has stated it, well, Stevens Point is not as successful if Wisconsin Rapids is not doing well. And having, I've had that perspective amongst our neighbors, if it's the town of Rome to the south or Village of Buren or Port Edwards, et cetera, if we're not all pulling in a direction that's positive, we will all be hamstrung for achieving our goals. And I think that's something that, in my tenure, trying to keep open communication relations with all of our neighbors, whether they touch our boundaries or not, we're a part of a broader region, and that's how we have to think of ourselves. And
we flourish together. We fail separate.
Yeah,
I mean, if we don't work together in some way, it's again one of those situations where not everybody has to get along. I mean, when your high schools play each other, it's okay to root against, the other school and stuff. But as adults, as human beings, when it comes to these bigger issues, we've got to be able to come together. We've got to work together and realize how connected we are. And if for any other reason, you hit on the perfect note there that we benefit when the others are doing well, and vice versa. And if we're not pulling for each other, if we're not helping each other, then none of us are going to make it. None of us are going to be okay. And so it is that much more important. Were there other highlights you wanted to touch on from the meeting?
I was hoping that we would have a guest join me today, but unfortunately the schedule didn't allow, and that is the one of the two new co-owners of the Hotel Mead. That property sold in the last some time since our last show, and really excited about their plans and hopes and aspirations for the iconic Hotel Mead. So we'll have them on a future show, but that's something that I think is pretty exciting to our community. It fits really well with some of the things we were talking about from visitor activities. And that property, as our only full-service hotel in the city, needs to be vibrant. It can't just be surviving. And so I think these folks that are taking on that challenge have a great degree of track record, but they're also very young and energetic and enthusiastic about the future of this community. So it'll be interesting as they start, and I won't get into it because they can share it on the show, because I think it's really important for them to share their excitement.
Yeah, let them say their vision and everything, but I'm with you on this too, and doing some research on them. They have a very good track record, and they are right in line with what we do around here and the vibe of this community and everything.
That's right.
It should fit perfectly. It should be a nice seamless. It's a very similar kind of thing with the Rafters and what happened there, where you have a change in ownership, but as fans, unless you heard about it, you're not going to notice a difference. You're really not going to see any difference. And the Mead, you might see a difference as far as improvements and those sorts of things.
Definitely.
But as far as the way things are run, it's going to be a steady ship there. I mean, it's going to be pretty similar. And I appreciate you saying that, because honestly, it's one of those things where the Hotel Mead, we almost, I don't want to say we take it for granted, but there are things like that in our community. I just had the Elks Lodge people on, and they were talking about the money they raise and the scholarships they do and everything, and we think about it, and it's kind of like, wow, I don't know if I give them enough credit, and I certainly appreciate them. I've known about them as long as I've lived in this community, but I don't know if I or many of us give them enough attention or enough appreciation, and it's not just them, it's plenty of organizations and different groups like that. So any chance we can to kind of, tip our hat to them or give them a note, we want to. And it also is another part of that community that makes us thrive. Just like having a conference center, a Hotel Mead, something like that in our community. Imagine this community without that. Where do you have the Hot Stove Rendezvous? Where do you have, this event or this event or the bridal show we just had? These kind of things. This is, again, bringing in not only fun and interesting stuff to our community, but, again, to get to the economy a part of it, it brings in dollars.
Yeah, they host a tremendous amount of conferences. I do a lot of greetings every week at the Mead when people from the beekeepers to you name the group. It's just really incredible.
Staff knows you there by first name.
Yeah, right. Oh, definitely. Definitely. Yeah, and they've hired some new staff. But I think the thing that I've heard from concern from community members is they're just here to invest and then to leave. And that couldn't be further from the truth. They're here invested. They want to own that property for the long haul. So I think that's really encouraging.
And I was able to find that out myself just by going through a couple different pages and just doing a little bit of research. And I cannot encourage you guys out there enough to do some homework on these things when it comes to this stuff, because if you have concerns, they're understand. We all have concerns.
Right.
All you got to do is just do a little bit of work, and you can find out more answers to these. Or if you want to just ask the mayor yourself, you can call in right now, 715-424-2600 to call up and join us in the conversation. I wanted to get into this, but I wanted to give you a chance first. Was there any other city council notes or anything else?
Let me just double check my council report. I had a couple things. There, from an economic development standpoint, there was a couple of ribbon cuttings that happened over here on West Grand the last month.
Hey, I wanted to touch on this.
Mimi's Quilting Cottage, which is near the Hometown Market or IGA grocery store, as well as Mattress by Appointment. Those folks have also, when we talked about community confidence, I mean, they put their money on the line, they sign leases, they make investments, and it's really exciting to see continued occupancy of space on West Grand Avenue. It's been long said that we'd like to see more options, more retail, more stores on the west side. So I think it's pretty exciting to see that.
And it is that much more to keep the dollars in town. Having local businesses is a good way of doing that, and not only for us as community members supporting those businesses, but also just flourishing as an economy. And it goes so many different ways, and those are great business, different the unique ones too with the quilt and that.
And her customers there were not from Wisconsin Rapids; they were all from outside of the area.
Interesting.
She said the majority of her folks that come in and take classes with her do not live in the area, and so it's pretty exciting and encouraging that folks are coming to travel to Wisconsin Rapids for a particular good or service.
Absolutely. And why not us?
Yeah.
I mean, I've thought that since I was a little kid living around here. Why not us? Why couldn't we do this? Why couldn't we have that? And it is so amazing to be where we are at this age and going through. We went to the same schools, basically. We, all this stuff, and to see that we have a hockey team in this town now. We have a baseball team in this town. We've got this coming up. We've got this business and that. And it's there is work to be done. Don't get me wrong, but it is also encouraging. I think just taking the wins where we can sometimes, and being appreciative of that, while also looking ahead. And that kind of brings me to my next question.
Sure.
Because for those of us, like a job like I do here, I'm used to, Bob Look used to put it perfectly, spinning plates. I got this plate going, and I got to go get this one and this one. I'm used to that. You have a very similar thing with what you do in having to do multiple things while thinking about other things as well. What is it like running while you're running? You're running to your fifth term. You're running for that, and at the same time, you are busy running right now. You're running office. You're doing your job here. How do you strike that balance? Along with at the same time, a similar question that I asked you when we first started talking. Finding that balance of your personal life and your political life.
Yeah, making time for everything. I think one, just having really set priorities. As it relates to my work at City Hall, the priorities and the objectives are unchanged. Whether I'm running for re-election or if I'm recently re-elected, we have issues that don't have a calendar or a cycle to them. Right. Let's take the train issue for example. We met with CN yesterday. They brought in some new staff that we hadn't met with before that were not real familiar with the challenges we've been having with blocked crossings. So, that priority remains unchanged, whether I'm running for re-election or I'm not. Keeping the lines of communication and really all of the priorities. I mean, some might say, well, he's doing that because he's running for office. Well, no, there's a timing for things based upon people's availability sometimes, and frankly, a seasonality when it comes to seasons, winter and others. So I think that's something that keeps me motivated and driven, is just having clear priorities for myself. What's on my agenda? What am I working on? And I think as it relates to balancing kind of the personal and the running for office, you just have less social time or downtime, if you will. When you spend a weekend knocking doors, as I have been, it creates a little bit of a challenge from that standpoint to continue, to meet my objectives of communicating and working with voters. So that's always something that's exciting and challenging and rewarding all at the same time.
Yeah, and it's also a credit to not only what you're doing, but for those of us as we go into the presidential election, and that to kind of be able to give us a little bit of insight. Certainly, it's a different ball game and that, but just a little bit of an idea of kind of what that's like to be able to balance those things. And I think that especially when we're in the biggest political year, is always a presidential year. It's that much more important for us to kind of be able to be, let's be adults.
Right.
You know, this idea you can disagree with somebody without insulting them or kind of, you know, treating them then less than a human being, less than you would your neighbor or something like that. We got to keep that in mind. We have to bring some humanity back into some of this stuff, because you can disagree with a person's politics and there's no issue with that. But once you start kind of calling them out as a human being, then you lose your point. You could have the greatest point in the world, but you lose it. Most people, especially what we're seeing by the numbers in society about how people feel about that stuff.
Yeah, civility goes a long way. I think, you know, people just treating each other as civilly as they would treat their mother or father, or you know, and I think from my perspective, as it relates to local office, you know, I'm seeing some of the national challenges as it relates to all the people running for president and things that they're saying does translate somewhat locally, but I find that most people recognize that I'm a community member just like the rest of them, right? And I'm a homeowner and a property taxpayer like them too. And so I think you can level with people on a different way than if you were running for other office. And I enjoy that. I mean, people say, well, why are you still running for mayor? Because I truly enjoy it. I live and breathe being mayor 7 days a week, and it's not something you can just turn off, or you just decide that, oh, I'm not gonna have that, you know, mayor edge or mayor look. That's just my life. You know, so I think that's a big difference from a civility standpoint too.
I have some questions from a listener here that I want to get to, but first, because you touched on right where I wanted to go with this. For one, do you have moments where you look at the way the big presidential election's going and all the turmoil with some of these candidates are going through and kind of be like, well, at least I'm not dealing with that.
Yeah. Most definitely.
Perspective sometimes.
Yeah, and just the fact that, you know, you're trying to play offense and defense at the same time, and we're doing that at a local level because there's always community issues that people are passionate about, and so I think it's just obviously magnified on a lot larger scale when you think about those things. And
you mentioned that you eat, live, and breathe this. This is something this is a daily thing for you. It's in your DNA. This is what you do. One of the more interesting things that I think is difficult, especially where you are, you're going in looking for a fifth term here. We've heard your voice, we've heard your message in that. Keeping your own hunger, but at the same time making sure that we're all hungry as well. That we are on point with you. We are right on the same page with you, and keeping your voice kind of going. Forgive the metaphor, the sports metaphor, but one of the greater coaches that I've ever seen in hockey, Joe Quenneville for the Blackhawks. He wins 3 Stanley Cups there. He's one of the all-time winningest coaches in history. But as good as he is and as great as he was, his voice started to kind of get old in that locker room. He kind of said the same thing over and over again for 5-6 years, and it kind of got, you know, to the point where even these players that love him and would fight to the death for him were like, they tune him out. So you have to have a kind of changing of the guard.
You do.
How do you keep that from your own message on point like that and keep that kind of energy going?
Well, I think part of it is meeting with voters and hearing what the residents, what's on their mind. I think, you know, I can view things from City Hall, or I can view things from my perspective, but I need to continue to stay relevant in terms of what are the issues that people are concerned about. I think for my own interest, right, I have to continue to work on challenging problems. I find myself as somewhat of a deal maker, but also a problem solver. Like if somebody encounters or brings the city an issue that they're concerned about that helps us advance our community, I'm all over it, and I think that's what's exciting for me, is to make sure that you know, folks understand that you know, I'm just as hungry to continue to solve and to be that community champion on a variety of issues. Sometimes I can't take them on all at once, right? We've got a dog park issue, for example, and some people said, Mayor, you got to do something with the dog park. I agree. You know, how are we going to do something about the dog park collectively? I'm willing to help navigate and get the political approvals and all those things done, but there's some things that I just can't do myself, right? And raise the money for the dog park, for example, or some of those things. So it really takes a team effort and a community to come together on these issues, and I think that's a big part of work of being mayor.
It's another job that you have too there, of balancing all those issues that every one of us out there have something that's incredibly important to us, or a cause that's important to us, and coming to you with that and feeling like, well, this is the biggest topic you're going to hear today. Right. The person right behind you is thinking the same thing when they're coming with their topic.
That's
so,
right.
You know, not only balancing all of that, but being able to treat every individual, making sure that they know that, yes, it is important to me. It is, you know, I have to balance all these issues, but your issue is very important to me. And
that's right.
Being able to do that. We are again speaking with Wisconsin Rapids Mayor Zach Vruwink. We also have Wisconsin Rapids Community Media in with us. We have a couple of questions that were handed in to us from a listener for the mayor, so we're going to get to those and some other stuff when we come back from our last break here on Morning Magazine, AM 1320, WFHR. At your temperatures, it is 3 in Stevens Point, 2 in Marshfield and Wausau, and 5 here in Wisconsin Rapids, where you have Morning Magazine. Your host, James, here. I am joined by Wisconsin Rapids Mayor Zach Vruwink, along with Joe from Wisconsin Rapids Community Media, and we appreciate both of you being in with us again. And I want to thank our listener, whoever handed in these questions for the mayor. Thank you very much. We always appreciate hearing from you guys, and you guys are interviewers just as much as I am when it comes to this. So the first question I had here was, is there a new business going on Dove Avenue?
Yeah, and that was the one I referenced in the Planning Commission report. So that was Dwayne's Performance and Repair. They're moving from the village of Buren into the city of Rapids here. And so really excited and happy to welcome them. The city council approved their conditional use permit last night, which will allow them to expand the amount of the types of services that they operate out of that location. So expect them to get underway. I know they're already there, but now to expand their services as a result of the city council action.
Is this something that you or the council or anybody, when it comes to a business moving like that from a Buren to here or from Plover or somewhere else to here, do you have anything really kind of to do with that as far as the selling them on the area? I would imagine that they've already kind of been sold on the area. That's why they're moving here. Yeah. Now, do you kind of help with that transition at all, or are you just kind of there if need be?
Well, certainly there if they need it, but at the same time, we're not out soliciting and trying to poach is a common word that's used in our world.
Thank you, because that's what I was trying to get at. Yeah.
It's not productive. We'd rather add economic value than just try to steal from one another, because it's a zero-sum game, right? Right. Now, in a case like this, the city of Rapids might be better served for that type of business or any business for that matter. I mean, from an exposure and traffic, those types of things, the city certainly offers benefits maybe that other neighbors don't offer from that standpoint.
Just with what we were talking about before about all of our communities kind of working together, I wanted to make sure, because I know our listeners, I could hear it coming. It's one of those things. That's not something that is. It's something that comes from others and the personal business's decision. Right. We do have a call coming in. Let's go ahead and take that. Good morning. You have a question for the mayor?
Yes, I do. A real quick question. I know there was talk at one time with our new garbage system that they might or might not once every 6 months or 3 months maybe come around and pick up like larger items that don't fit in the garbage can. Did they ever come up with anything on that, or are you just obliged or have to haul it to the dump yourself? I'll listen off the air for your answer.
Great. Thanks.
Thank you for the call.
Good question. The City Council has not put that item back on their agendas for discussion. So at this point, the answer is you'll have to provide your own service and transportation and that type of thing. I'm concerned about that because I think in the future, people's ability to transport that or find a service or just remediate and dispose of their items can be a problem and a public nuisance potentially. So as of right now, no, the City Council has not brought that issue or referred that back for discussion. So at this point, there is not a program in place.
And we had another question here from a listener. What's happening at the former Chamois car wash location? And that's something actually I've heard from a number of people just wandering around in town, just listening and wondering.
Well, the county owned it for some time, and the county got it back on back taxes. And before that, Wood Trust Bank had it on from a bankruptcy situation. So there was an individual purchased it. Northward Pedal and Paddle is the business that bought the building. They've cleaned it up, as folks have seen. It's just tremendously less of an eyesore than it was before, and those folks are working real hard at reoccupying that space. They do tours for this time of year. They're doing fat tire bike tours as well as snowshoe trips throughout the region, and then in the summer they'll do canoe, kayak, stand-up paddleboard, bike tours in our region. So it's really excited to have them in Wisconsin Rapids. I know that they were looking at Buren and Rome and landed in Wisconsin Rapids and took on a project like Chamois to really clean up an eyesore in the entrance of our downtown area.
Not only am I going to be one of their favorite customers, because I'm going to be there all the time, especially in the summer, all those things I want to do, all of them, every one of them. And I want to do them all at the same time, too, because this sounds like so much fun. But I'm really glad you said that too, because that's not an easy project, and there might be other buildings they could have taken on or that might have been a little easier or something. I appreciate that they took that one on, and that's a spot in town again that is, that little area right there where we're leading into some really great stuff with the library and with mead and stuff. We want to have better presentation into that area. And it starts kind of right there on that little corner. It's nice to have that. There's already a nice spots there with the bank and the gas station. So that is a nice addition.
Right. Yeah. And they were looking at doing some retail. I'm not sure time frame or a timeline for some of their other renovations. Some of that stuff is difficult in the winter months. But I know that as the pool opens, they've talked about partnering with the pool facility to do different types of lessons, where maybe it's scuba diving certification, maybe it's snorkeling instruction, those types of things that they could expand into by having the proximity to the new pool. So pretty exciting stuff, and certainly a big investment on their own accord. With the new street, there were special assessments associated with the street. There was the back tax situation that it was a former gas station, so there's a lot of concerns that come along and associated with that. But it's pretty exciting to see what Patrick and his gang have been able to do over at the former Chamois. And
that back tax situation, it can be such a difficult one to get past. It could be almost the biggest roadblock in some of these things.
Yeah.
So again, a big kudos to them and any business that really takes on something like that, because it is not easy to do. Right. It can hold back a lot of people. Mayor, we're wrapping up our final minute here. Is there anything that you wanted to touch on before we let you go?
I think we covered the gamut today, but certainly if folks have questions or concerns, don't hesitate to reach out or give me a call or send me an email. Happy to respond to those, and look forward to bringing some guests on to our next show and connecting with listeners next month.
I really looking forward to talking again real soon, and you take care out there, and thanks for joining us.
All right, James. Thank you.
Thank you.